Masechet Zevaḥim, Daf Mem. Amar Mor, En li ela matan sheva sheme'akebot bechol makom. We begin with citing a section of the Baraita that we learned on the previous daf that is wondering, how do you know that the 4 sprinklings on the corners of the inner Mizbeach are absolutely necessary? Well, because it says Va'asa kasher asa, that's Vayikra 4:20, and it says you should do to this pod what you did to the other pod, which we know already because it already repeats all of the laws regarding the pod for the community that were said above for the pod of the Kohen Gadol. And so therefore, why do you need this pasuk that says, oh, do to this one as you also already did for the others? Oh, it's repeating it to tell me that if you miss any, then you have done nothing. Now, we know already that that's true for the 7 sprinklings that are done to the parochet. That for sure, and li'ela, I would only know those 7, that those are required in all places. Now what we're going to wonder is, what do you mean in all places? Where else do you see 7 sprinklings that are required that you're assuming here, oh, in all places it's required, and therefore this pasuk here is coming to teach me specifically that the 4 sprinklings on the corners of the inner Mizbeach are necessary. So that's the opening question here. En li ela matan sheva shemakebot bechol makom. Hecha, where do we see bechol makom? What other places do we see that the 7 sprinklings are necessary? Amar Papa bepara u benegaim. The Papa says one of them is the para. When one performs the para aduma, one does so on had hezetim, and one takes the kohen takes the blood from the para aduma and sprinkles it 7 times towards Ohel Moed. And those are absolutely necessary. And we know that from Zot Chukat HaTorah, which we learn, since it says Zot Chukat HaTorah, these are things that absolutely must be done. Also, regarding Nega Sarat, part of the purification process is that we take oil and we sprinkle it also 7 times towards Ohel Moed. And for Sarat, it says Zot Tiyeh Torah Mesorah. So since it says this is the Torah, it means you have to do it specifically just like this, and you can't, if you do it 5 times, 6 times, it is not enough. Here's a pasuk that says that the Kohen will dip his finger in the oil, and Izamin Hashem, Sheva Pe'amim Lifnei Hashem. Lifnei Hashem means towards the sanctuary. And so there you go. Those are 7 sprinklings, and we know from the Pesukim that they are required, and therefore we see in all places, we see in other places, in all places that 7 are required. So too in the Par Chatat, the inner Par Chatat, the 7 sprinklings on the Kaporet, on the parochet, will be necessary. Matan arba minayim. Now, the Baraita continues and says, all right, so how do you know that the 4 on the corners of the Mizbach HaKetoret are necessary? Talmud Omar ken yaseh. That's what we use that pasuk in Vayikra 4:20, that you do for this one like you did for that one, this pod of the community, like the same that you did for the pod of the Kohen Gadol, but we already repeated all the things you have to do. So this pasuk is coming to say, oh yeah, it's also absolutely necessary. Now we wonder, wait a second, how'd you know that the 7 are required in both types of pod because they are written and repeated? So the repetition says, oh, so therefore you have to do it. And then it says, ken yaseh, so that's an extra pasuk. That's how you know they're necessary. Well, why don't you use the same derivation, the same logic for the 4 sprinklings also, where it's said once by the pot of the Kohen Gadol, then it's said again by the pot of for the community, and then it says, oh, for this pot, do as you did before. So that's a repetition. So why not just derive from this pasuk here, from the same logic that just like the 7 are required, so too the 4 are required. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah lo nisracha ela leRabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yirmiyah says that the derivation in the Braita is needed only according to Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya, the Lema'la omer keren keranot shetayim. Lemata hu omer keren karnot arba. Dibre Rabbi Shimon. So we explain that according to Rabbi Shimon, it says in the first paragraph for the Parchatat of Kohen Gadol, when it talks about sprinkling it on the corner, it doesn't say the word keren, but rather karnot. Karnot just means plural. It doesn't say how many, so we can assume the minimum that's plural, which is 2. And also in the next paragraph about the communal sin, when the judges make a mistake, when it was referring to the keren, it refers to karnot. It doesn't say explicitly 4 karnot, it just says plural. So I would have to assume also here that this is the minimum of 2. But since it's repeated, and then it says, and you do the same thing, that means that we should add them together and take the 2 from the first paragraph and the 2 from the second paragraph, and that's how you get 4. So we see that we need the ken ya'aseh in the case of the corners, because we would not know by itself, unlike the 7 where it says explicitly you need 7. And furthermore, in all places, 7, where it says 7 sprinklings, all 7 are required. So for that we don't need any extra derivation. But for the corners, we don't even know that we need 4. So there's no repetition here. We learned 2 from the first paragraph, 2 from the second paragraph. Okay, so now we know that there's 4, but nothing has been repeated because we need both of those instances to say 2 plus 2. Then when you say, ken ya'aseh, that extra pasuk, that's coming to teach me regarding the 4, that they are all necessary. Now that was according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda has his own derivation. Rabbi Yehuda omer eno sarich. I don't need that derivation. Harehu omer be'ohel moed. Al kol hamor be'ohel moed. Rabbi Yehuda says, look at this pasuk. Says that one does the sprinkling for Tanakon min hadam al kont mizbach ketoret hasamim lifnei Adonai asher be'ohel moed. Vet kol adam ha'peish bochel yisod mizbach ha'olah. So the Kohen, this is in the context of the Kohen, of the Korban Chatat for the Kohen Gadol, that he takes the blood and puts it al karnot. That's the word that we just made reference to. It doesn't say 4 karnot, it says karnot, onto the Mizbeach of the Ketoret Hasamim, the inner Mizbeach, Lifnei Hashem, and it says Asher Be'ohel Moed. Now I know it's an Ohel Moed. You just said Lifnei Hashem, and you told me also Ketoret Hasamim. I know where it is. I know it's Lifnei Hashem. Lifnei Hashem is already in the Echal. Why do you have to say in Ohel Moed? This comes to teach me that I have to sprinkle it on all of the corners that are in Ohel Moed, and there are 4 corners in there, and therefore, since they're all under that roof, we have to sprinkle on all of them. Since Rabbi Yehuda learns that you have to do all 4 from the words Ohel Moed, what does he need ken ya'aseh for? That Rabbi Shimon used to derive the same thing. But was Rabbi Yehuda going to do with those words? We need it for the Braita that says, it doesn't say regarding the pot of Yom Kippur that the Kohen Gadol has to do semicha and that he has to pour the leftover blood onto the base of the Mizbeach. So how do I know that you'd have to? Because it says ken ya'aseh, these extra words says, tell me that whatever you just learned regarding the pod of the community, pod chatat of the community, you know what? Apply that also to the pod of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and so that you know that he has to also do semicha and pour shiarei hadam. Ul par Yom Kippurim lo lamadu ha'amat la par ze Yom Kippurim. Is that true that you don't have any derivation for Yom Kippur? Over here in the Baraita that we learned yesterday, we learned from the word in 420, la pad, that applies to pad Yom Kippur. So this word by itself already tells me that whatever you learned above applies to Yom Kippur also. So why do I need the words ken ya'aseh as well? Because if I just had the derivation of the word lapad, I might think that only applies to services that are required for atonement, like the placing of the blood on the four corners. But if it's an avodah that is not required for atonement, if you don't do semicha or pour it on the base, then you still achieve atonement. So I might think that you don't have to do it at all. I would not be able to derive it from the word par. And therefore, I need ken yaseh to tell me that you're supposed to, lechatechila, also do semicha and pour shi'er adam for the par of Yom Kippur. But Rabbi Shimon, hai be'ol moed my avileh. Now Rabbi Shimon, he uses ken yaseh to learn the requirement for the four corners. Now, what is he going to do with the word ohel moed? Be'ohel moed mi ba'ileh shim nifhata tikra shel echal lo haya mazeh. He needs that to teach that if there was a hole in the roof of the hechal, then you cannot sprinkle on it because it has to be sprinkled on the mizbeach haketoret that's in ohel moed, meaning indoors. And so, if there's all of a sudden something falls through the roof and there's a hole in the roof, no, that's not in ohel moed anymore. This is actually an important halakha because it means that at least for these types of korbanot, one would not be able to bring them without a hechal. There are some korbanot that all you need is a mizbeach, even without. So the question is, without a bet hamikdash, can you make any sacrifices? Is it sufficient to just go make a mizbeach, an outdoor mizbeach, and bring korbanot? Possibly, but at least for this type, it says be'ohel moed, so this would have to be in an enclosure, so you couldn't bring this without a bet hamikdash. Ve'idach, and how about Rabbi Yehuda? Where does he learn this law from? Oh, me asher, it says in that same pasuk, me asher be'ohel moed. So that extra word asher teaches me that it has to be indoors. Ve'idach asher la darish, and Rabbi Shimon, he will not learn anything just from the extra word asher. It's just that word asher is needed just for the context. Abaye amar le'Rabbi Yehuda name isterich salka datech amina midi dehava semicha u'shiarei hadam daf agav dechetiban uchvilan la me'akeba matan arba name la titakeb kamashma lan. Abaye says that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, we need this derasha of chen ya'aseh, even though he derived that you're supposed to put on all four. He didn't learn it from karanot, but rather from be'ohel moed. So then that means everything under ohel moed. But even though it says, yes, from ohel moed I can learn that lechatechila you need all four, but b'di'avad, is it required and we wouldn't get kapara without all four? Just from the word ohel moed, I wouldn't necessarily know that, because I could have reasoned as follows. It could have been raised in our minds that, just like regarding semicha and pouring out the leftover blood, although the Pesukim talk about that, and it says it once in the first paragraph, and it repeats it again in the second paragraph for Kohen Gadol and then for the community, nevertheless, they are not me'akev. And so therefore I might have thought that so too, the placing of the four on the four corners, which it does say, indicate regard by with the words ohel moed, maybe, yes, you should do it, but maybe it's not me'akev. And therefore, Abaye says, even the Rabbi Yehuda will require the derasha that was said in that baraita that learns from ken ya'aseh, that's an extra pasuk that comes to say yes and do the same thing in order to teach me that the four corners are me'akev. Lepar. Ze par Yom Kippurim. Now, the Braita continues and talks about the word lepar in that same pasuk and says, that's referring to the par on Yom Kippur, that also the sprinklings of the inner par on Yom Kippur are me'akev. Lemahil cheta. What is this coming to teach? Ilakev b'shita chuka ketiva beh. Is it coming to teach that they are necessary to achieve atonement? That's obvious because it says there, Zot chuka ta Torah. And we already saw that anytime it says chok, that means that everything there is absolutely necessary. So why do you need lepar to teach me that these sprinklings are necessary on Yom Kippur? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak la nisrecha ela Rabbi Yehuda. So this derasha of lepar is actually necessary for the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. De'amar ki ketiba chuka devarim hana'asim bebigdei lavan bifnim shemigdim ma'aseh lechabero lo asa ve'lo chelum. He says that this word chuka does not apply to everything that is done on Yom Kippur that has to be done exactly, otherwise it's not correct, but rather it applies only to the things, that activities that the Kohen Gadol does while he's wearing bigdei lavan, which he wears when he's doing special Yom Kippur activities, and that he does bifnim, inside the Kodesh Kodashim, when he brings the pan of coals and the ketoret. And so when he's doing that, he has to make sure to do it in the proper order. If he did one thing before the other, meaning not in the proper order, then it's no good. That's what Chukah teaches. Aval devarim hana'asim bebigdei lavan bachutz hikdim ma'aseh lechabero ma'aseh asui. But if it was activities that are done with the white clothing on, but outside of the Kodesh Kodashim, and he switched the order, then b'diavad, that's okay. Therefore, since Chukah has a limited application, ema medechesidran la me'akebi hazot nami la me'akebi kamashmalan. I might think that just like the order of activities outside Kodesh Kodashim is necessary to get atonement, I might think also that the sprinkling on all four is not necessary. And that's why I need Lapar to teach me that, this is according to the Rabbi Yehuda, teach me that all four are absolutely necessary. Matkif la Rav Papa. Now Rav Papa is going to challenge this idea that we need the word lepar, in that the Braita says we need the word lepar regarding Yom Kippurim for the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says, well, we would know only some things from Chukah, only the things that are done in the Kodesh Kodashim, but other things we wouldn't know from Chukah, and that's why we need lepar to teach me that Yom Kippur you need to do all the other things, including the sprinkling on the four corners. So that's what we proposed. But Papa says, no, Rabbi Yehuda does not need that, because look at the following Braita. Pasuk says that when the Kohen Gadol has finished atoning for the sanctuary, meaning he finishes doing the sprinkling that is done inside, then the next thing is he goes out and does Hasa'ir HaChai. Now, why do you have to say when he finishes this? Just say, go do the next thing. Why do you have to say, when he finishes that? Just, we assume it's in order. And the answer is, Im kiper kila, v'im lo kiper lo kila, diber Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Akiva, it teaches, Im kiper, if he sprinkled the blood that's inside the sanctuary, then he has done that properly, and then he can go on to the next thing. But if he did not kiper, meaning sprinkled inside, then he has not finished, and he can't go on to the next thing. That's according to Rabbi Akiva. But there's another opinion. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda, mipnei lo nomar im kila kiper, ve'im lo kila lo kiper. We should understand the phrase in Torah the other way around. If he finished doing everything properly, then he gets atonement. But if the Kohen Gadol does not do everything properly, he does not get atonement. And therefore, according to the Rabbi Yehuda, we learn from this phrase, V'chila mikaperet HaKodesh, that the Kohen Gadol has to do everything. It's all me'akev. All the sprinklings have to be done exactly as is. And therefore, since the Rabbi Yehuda learns it from V'chila mikaperet HaKodesh, we don't have to say that he wouldn't need lepar, zepar Yom Kippurim in the Baraita in order to teach me that the four sprinklings on the Mizbach HaKetoret have to all be done. So back to our question, lepar, zepar Yom Kippurim, what is it coming to teach us? Don't we know already that the various things on Yom Kippur, especially the sprinkling on the four corners, is necessary? Amar Rav Papa, la nisracha ela le'et dam u'betvila. The pasuk in Vayikra 4:6 says these words: et etzba'o bedam, and it also says the word tivila, right? V'taval et etzba'o bedam. And we learn something from these three words: et amar Ravacha bar Yaakov. So we're going to see what we learn from these three things. And this is said regarding the Kohen Gadol's par chatat in Vayikra 4. And then the word lapar later on in that perek will teach me, also on Yom Kippur, these three things are necessary. That's what it's coming to teach. Now, what are these three things? So the word et, lo nisracha leachshir imin shebe'etzba. If the Kohen has a blister on his finger, is that considered an interposition? The word et says it's okay. He can use his finger to do the sprinkling, even if he has a blister. Badam, shehe badam, shi'ur tevila ma'ikara, v'tabal velo misapeg. The word badam teaches that you have to have enough blood in the vessel from the beginning, and enough that you can dip your finger into it. In other words, when you're collecting the blood, don't collect a tiny bit of blood in one vessel, a little blood in the next vessel, and then pour it together. You have to collect in the vessel at least enough blood that you can do a dipping. And the word taval means that when he actually dips his finger, he can't swipe the sides and to get the blood, but rather there has to be enough pool of a pooling of blood that he can dip it in and get it, not by swiping the sides. Now those two sound similar, badam and vetabal. There has to be enough blood. So what's exactly the difference between them? V'istarich limichtav badam, di katav rachamana vetabal, hava amina afal gab delek ashur tevila meikara, katav rachamana bedam. We have to say bedam, because if it just said taval, that there has to be enough blood there at the time when you dip, you might have thought maybe that's okay, even if there was not enough blood for dipping originally when you collected the blood, and then you just added a couple of cups together to get enough. You might think that's okay. Therefore, Badam says at the initial receiving of the blood, there has to be enough for dipping. And if it says Badam, I would say, okay, fine. As long as you have a little pool at the outset, then afterwards, it doesn't matter if you wipe the sides and to collect the blood. No, you have to make it pool on the bottom and dip your finger into that pool of blood to get it out, and that's why we need vetabal. And so that's why we need lapad to teach me these three laws that otherwise I would not know apply also and are necessary for Yom Kippur. Mizbach ketoret samim lamali. Now, back to the pasuk in Vayikra 4:7, it says that the Kohen will sprinkle the blood on the Mizbach Ketoret Samim, Lifnei Hashem. Now, I already know that it says Lifnei Hashem, it's the one that's inside the Mizbach Ketoret. Why does it have to say Mizbach Ketoret Samim, the Mizbach of the incense offerings? She'im lo nitchanech mizbech b'ketoret hasamim lo haya mazeh. That's to teach us that, let's say there's a new Mizbach HaKetoret. They just made a new one. You can make a new one and replace the old one. But if it hasn't been used to burn a ketoret yet, then you cannot sprinkle the blood on it. You can only sprinkle the blood for these offerings that the blood needs to be sprinkled once you inaugurated that mizbeach by actually using it for ketoret. Tanya kivated rapapa. ועשה כאשר עשה. מה תלמוד לומר לפר? לרבות פר יום הכיפורים לכל מה שאמור בעניין דברי רבי. There's a braita that supports Rav Papa, as we just quoted, that quotes this pasuk, ועשה כאשר עשה, which says, do this like you do that. Okay, we understand, we learned a bunch of things from that, but that pasuk continues and says, la par, for the par. What is that coming to include? It's coming to include par of Yom Kippurim, for all the things that are mentioned in this matter, in the matter of the pad for the Kohen Gadol who makes a mistake. It says, and do all these things. And it says, the blister, the blood, the immersion, all of these laws, that applies to Yom Kippur as well. And that is the opinion of Rabbi. So that supports what we just said to explain Rav Papa. Amar Rabbi Ishmael, Kal Vachomer. Rabbi Ishmael says, I can learn those three laws about the blister and the pooling of blood. You need enough. I don't need the word par to teach me that applies not only to the par chatat of a communal offering, but also to the par on Yom Kippur. I can derive it from a kal vachomer. Uma, b'makom shelo hushva korban lekorban, hishva ma'asim lema'asim, makom sheishva korban lekorban, eno din sheishve ma'aseh lema'aseh. If in a place where the korbanot are different, we'll see what it's talking about, but it's going to be a case where the type of animal is different, and yet the actions that you do with the blood are the same, then all the more so in a case where the animals are the same. The pad, hatat, of a communal offering, when the community makes a mistake, is a pad, and the pad on Yom Kippur is also a pad. So since those are the same types of animals, all the more so we would assume that the laws of the blood rituals of one apply also to the other. And that's how we would know that the pad on Yom Kippur has the same law about the blister and the dam and the taval. אלא מה תלמוד לומר לפר? זה פר האדם דבר של ציבור. לפר זה פר כהן Mashiach. Therefore, the Bishmael says, the extra word lapar, I don't need it for Yom Kippur. I'm going to use it right here for this context. Lapad, that's referring to Pad Helim Davar Shel Sibur, when the community makes a mistake. And Lapad is referring to the paragraph before regarding Kohen Mashiach, and is teaching me the simple rule that the sprinklings that are required for one are necessary for the other also, even though actually the pasuk does not make explicit all the laws of the sprinklings. And so therefore, Lapad is just going to teach me that whatever applies to the Paradim Shabbat Shel Sibur will also apply to Kohen Mashiach. Okay, so that's Rabbi Ishmael. Now we're going to analyze the statement further. Amar Mor. Shelo hushva korban lekorban. Mai lo hushva korban lekorban. When he said, from the beginning of the Kal Vachomer, a place where the type of korban is different, the animals are different. What is he talking about? What case? Maybe he's talking about two things that are done on Yom Kippur, different animals, a pad on Yom Kippur and a seir on Yom Kippur. And the laws are the same for those. But then you could reject the Kal Vachomer because you could say, you know why those are compared to each other? Because both of them, they're sprinkled in the Kodesh Kodashim. That's why they're the same. They have the same law. You can't derive from here regarding korbanot that are not in Kodesh Kodashim, and so that's from something that's not Kodesh Kodashim to the pad, which is in Kodesh Kodashim. That would be more different, so that can't be it. Maybe the two things that are different animals is the Paralim Davar Shel Sibur, when the judges make a mistake, and that's a pad. And the seir, if a community does avodah zarah, they bring a seir. And those are different types of animals, and yet the laws are the same. So that shows that you'd compare them even if the animals are different. Therefore, you can certainly compare them when it's the same animal. Is that the Kal Vachomer? But if so, ikal mifrach malahanach sheken mechaperin al averot mitzvah yedua. But these have in common that they are atoning for something that you know what they did. When the judges make a mistake about a particular law, they bring this pad. And when the community violates avodah zarah, so we know exactly what they are violating, and is prompted by that violation. Unlike the Pad of Yom Kippur, that just is brought every Yom Kippur for general, for whatever has, all sins, whatever happened, all atonement for impurity is brought, but not for something specific. Rather, it must be that it was first comparing the pad for when the community makes a mistake, and Sa'ir, which is a different type of animal of pad, that is brought on Yom Kippur. And those two are compared to each other for the laws, and therefore, all the more so, two parim will certainly be comparable, the Paralim Davar Shel Sibur and the pad of Yom Kippur. If in a case where there's two different types of animals, because this one is a pad and this one is a sa'ir, and yet we compare these laws to each other, for the laws that are written there. In the case where it's the same type of animal, where you have the pad of the Kohen Gadol and the pad of Yom Kippur, then all the more so we should should compare the details of the law and say that those laws about the blister and how much blood has to be pulled up in the cup, that would apply not only to Param Tavashisivur, but also to Par Yom Kippur. V'ata le Par Yom Kippurim le et badam utvila mipar Kohen Mashiach. V'ata le Seir Yom Kippurim meseire avodah zara mikal vachomer. And once we make that first kal vachomer, then we can apply that kal vachomer further. ועתה לפר יום הכיפורים לעת בדם ותפילה מפר כהן משיח, ועתה לשעיר יום הכיפורים משעירי עבודה זרה מקל וחומר. And so now we can equate any two animals that are the same type of animal, so the pod of Yom Kippur and the pod of Kohen Mashiach, those will be equated so that we can learn these laws et badam utvila. And furthermore, we just learned above that pod of Yom Kippur and Sa'id of Yom Kippur, because both of them are sprinkled inside, so we learn one from the other. Therefore, we can learn the laws of sprinkling from pod Yom Kippur till Sa'id Yom Kippur. And then since Sa'id of Yom Kippur is the same type of animal as the Sa'id for communal avodah zarah, therefore, all the more so, if you could learn a pod and a Sa'id together, then you can learn from one Sa'id to another. And in that way, we can make a chain link of one kal vachomer to another, or one hekesh to another, and learn multiple things. On the next daf, we're going to wonder, can you join multiple inferences together? And now we ask, can you link multiple midrashim together? We learned some of these laws from Hekesh, and then we added to that a kal vachomer, and so we add one thing to another in a chain link. Can you do that? The Gemara later on is going to have a full discussion about this on Daf 49b till 51b is a whole section about linking such things, whether you can link multiple exegetical rules together. And the answer here is Amara Papa Kasabat Tana Deber Bishmael Dabar Halamed Bekesh Choser Mlamed Bekal Vachomer. Yes, indeed, the author here, who is from the school of Bishmael, thinks that even though you learn one thing from a Hekesh, then you can go from that conclusion and extend it to a kal vachomer to yet another matter. And that's how we're able to derive each of these laws. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.